Hello, I am Dr. Laura Dryanska, and I work at the Institute of Psychology here at UKSW. I That's my specialization. One of the things I'm very interested in is communication. This is what I'm going to talk to you about today, in particular, the importance of communication at workplaces. One fundamental thing is that we cannot not communicate. We always communicate something, even when we're silent, even when we're trying not to communicate anything. There's always some type of a message or multiple messages that we are sending across. This is true for all of our lives, and this is true at our workplaces as well. So today I'm going to talk to you briefly about different types of communication at workplaces: upward communication, downward communication, business communication, and informal communication. We will look at what it looks like, taking an example of an administrative person who works at UKSW. His name is Marek. And another person employed at UKSW, a researcher, and the importance of communication and what it looks like in their lives. Of course, communication does not happen in a vacuum. So what's also very important is the concept of organizational culture. And you might have noticed that our culture here at UKSW is a culture that is pretty formal. And this is how we address each other. We pay a lot of attention into paying respect to one another. So sometimes it might come across a little less in English, but clearly it's very clear in Polish. And of course, we'll also speak about related uh, language issues when it comes to communication. As we have mentioned, when we talk about upward communication in organizations, you can imagine comes from the bottom towards the top. And this is a common form of communication. What does it look like? Well, one of the things is, for instance, open door policy. How do we feel about being able as employees to communicate to our supervisors, our directors? So the question is Marek open to and willing to talk to his supervisor, for example, if there is a problem, if there's an issue, or if there is something he's particularly proud of, right? What it looks like for this administrative professional. And that would be an example of upward communication. Sometimes upward communication kind of happens naturally through that open door policy. Sometimes it's more piloted in industrial organizational psychology. So we might have attitude surveys at workplace, climate surveys at workplace, in an anonymous way. Organizations may choose to ask the workers to let them know how they're doing. Another form of upward communication are focus groups, when people may sit down together, have a meeting with supervisors, meeting requesting more information, but also when sometimes they can vent, they can brag, they can talk about what's going on. A less fortunate one in organizations in general is exit interviews. So if someone is leaving organization, oftentimes choosing to leave, it's important to know why. Not always it's possible to tap into this information, but that is definitely an important source. And finally, suggestion boxes. There might be ways in which we might want to leave some suggestions as employees. What could be done better to run our organization? So those are just some forms of upward communication. How do we hear from our organization top down, right? Like, so the downward communication. Well, a very common form are emails. Here at UKSW, we use a lot of information passes through Teams as well. And already here, we need to be very attentive into what is the channel, how we are receiving organization communication. For example, after the meetings of the Senate, the administrative person might hear some important things, read some important things. Typically, the downward communication is written communication. It's official. There's official minutes, there's official resolution, and so on, for instance, by senators, that might be very relevant. The question is, do we read? Right? Like this is oftentimes the challenge of the organizations. And is there enough communication? But there's also something like communication overload. So, the flip side of it, when it seems like there's almost too much communication, we cannot keep up with all the information. Oftentimes, the good rule is to make the same information available through different channels. So, verbally, orally, stated in a meeting. Also, in addition to that, have it written and circulate by email. Sometimes policy manuals might be another source of upward communication, newsletters or intranets or listservs for the specific groups of people. So when it comes to that downward communication, we want to make sure that everyone who needs to know the information does receive that information, but also that we are not overloading people who do not necessarily need a certain type of information with that particular information. So organizations should have a really strategic approach to their downward communication. Of course, when it comes to organizational communication, we said we have the going top, going down, but also we have a lot of horizontal information, right? So there's a type of an etiquette when it comes to business communication that is different than contacting, for instance, your friends and family. We might be receiving memos, telephone calls, still emails, voicemail. There might be, of course, business meetings, department meetings, Senate meetings in the university setting. There's many different ways in which information might be just horizontally shared. And I feel it's a good reminder here in the light of our organizational culture at UKSW to remind you what is some important email etiquette, right? I feel because we are rather formal and in general, it is a good practice in workplace settings to always include a greeting, include a detailed, but not overly detailed, but specific and useful subject line. Definitely don't write in all caps because that might appear as screaming. It's also helpful to delete any unnecessary information when forwarding emails, making sure that only the intended information reaches the person. Run a spell check, avoid grammar and spelling errors. That just shows respect towards the person that we're contacting. And of course, important reminder not to spend company time on personal email and allow ample time for a person to respond. Sometimes we receive emails at all kinds of times and hours, and it's important that we realize what is the expectation. Maybe there's some unknown rules. Maybe an administrative person knows that, probably they will respond within a week. Maybe some additional pressures, for instance, for journal articles might be for the researcher to respond within 24 hours with the last minute corrections. So it's important that those rules are agreed upon and clear ahead of time. Now, a very interesting phenomenon that always happens with human beings, and UKSW is no different, the question of informal communication. How do we communicate with each other? What are some patterns of communication? So it's a very interesting phenomenon in terms of how information spreads. There's some specific models like grapevine patterns or other patterns of how information is being shared in an informal way. But one thing that we know, if there's a useful information that's maybe a little bit counterintuitive or interesting to people, people will find out. For instance, if I told you that maybe, I'm telling my friend, I'm telling Marek, oh, I've heard that there is free pizza in the room where we usually meet and have coffee, someone just ordered it or had extra. And, Marek goes there and he realizes, oh, it's almost gone. There was no email, there was no official communication, but just people found out very quickly. So this is how the informal communication works. However, we need to be careful because a part of informal communication is also gossip and rumor. And it's important to have a sense of where we're getting the information from and to check it against official sources, right? Like if the only source of information that you have is another person, it will be, well, could you point me into the specific resource, double checking it. Informal communication is great and can be very useful when it reinforces the actual messages, but unfortunately, this is the space where some errors and misinformation might sneak in. And of course, that might be harmful to individuals, especially in case when gossip is related to some personal situations or some personal issues that maybe someone is not quite willing to share. So we know that it is present at organizations, at all organizations, but we need to really be aware of it. And if necessary, take appropriate actions to clarify what's going on if there's too much informal information and the actual formal communication has not yet been released. There is certainly very much that can still be said about communication at workplaces, but what are some key takeaways as we think about an administrative professional and a researcher, a myriad of other people who are employed at the university? What's important to remember? Well, there are different forms of communication in terms of the upward, downward, horizontal communication and interpersonal communication, but we should also be mindful into which medium of communication we're using. Is it online media? Is it through Teams or chats? Is it an email? Is it maybe written communication and signed documents and so on? Or, of course, maybe it's telephone, maybe it's meetings. We need to pay attention into the form because each format will have its positive sides and its negative sides. So we need to be mindful. If something is very, very important and we definitely want to share it broadly, we need for people to realize and remember it is useful to reinforce communication and use several ways in which sometimes communicate several times as well with several individuals. And I think sometimes we can also leverage this more informal communication if we know who are key people who might be helpful in sharing the information. Also, let's remember to treat each individual as a unique person with their own unique preferences and learning who they are. Listening is key when it comes to communication. And I know that other videos have also attended to that. Of course, we mostly talked about sending out a message, but active listening and being a good receiver of communication is an art. And this is something that all of us need to prioritize.